I invite the member for Prince George Mackenzie to lead the House in prayer or reflection.
As we face uncertainty with floods and fires throughout our province, I ask this House to give us wisdom and reverence to use the resources of nature, that no one may suffer from an abuse of them, and that generations yet to come may continue to praise nature for its bounty. Thank you.
Introductions by members. Madam Clerk.
Introduction of bills. Private members' time.
Committee Chair. Member for Vancouver Kensington.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm honored to rise and speak to the motion to recognize Black History Month here in the province of British Columbia. The month of February in BC across Canada is recognized as Black History Month, and we know that Black Canadians have been a fundamental part of British Columbia since the province, even before the province was officially established, but often the contributions have been overlooked in the past. And the history of Black History Month comes from the United States, efforts there for the community to recognize and celebrate their history, and also in the context of the civil rights struggle in the United States. And it was officially adopted here in Canada and British Columbia, Madam Speaker, in February 2008. It was Senator Donald Oliver, the first Black man appointed to the Senate of Canada. He brought a motion to recognize the contributions of Black Canadians and also to recognize February as Black History Month, which was, it received unanimous approval and adopted March 4th, 2008. So it's now February 2024, and we're continuing to recognize the accomplishments and achievements of individuals from the Black community, and also the barriers that they've experienced. We have a history of colonization and the realities of systemic and institutionalized racism, which put up barriers, and also the history of slavery that we have here in British Columbia and across Canada. So certainly that's the context. And February is an opportunity to support and honor, celebrate and reflect on the stories, experiences and accomplishments of Black Canadians. We know that for too long, the stories of and contributions of Black Canadians have been marginalized. Their histories and contributions to this province have been little known or celebrated. And that's why our government, and I'm so honored to stand in the House today and join with everyone to mark Black History Month and pay tribute and also recognize the important contributions from this community. And in terms of taking action to deliver lasting change to better support the Black community, we know that supports taking steps, not only recognizes the contributions, but it benefits and enriches all of us as British Columbians. We know that the theme this year is recognizing excellence in the Black community, and really there are so many leading examples of inspiring change. We know that we have many BC Black pioneers who really played a fundamental role in terms of the foundation and laying down really many of the planks that make British Columbia what it is today. Right here on Vancouver Island, the first Black teacher on Vancouver Island, Emma Stark, in 1874, made her history and made that mark. And also the first elected school trustee is also from Saanich, Fielding Spots from South Saanich, was elected. We know in our legislature, Rosemary Brown, just an incredible MLA, great feminist and civil rights activist, really brought change Of course, Emery Barnes elected, and the distinction of serving as the first speaker as well here in British Columbia, so really recognizing that history. Our province is also taking steps to bring change. We know that more needs to be done. We have to raise awareness. That's why the kindergarten to grade 12 action plan on anti-racism includes adding Black history to British Columbia's curriculum so that students, kindergarten to grade 12, can learn about the stories of these pioneers and also really understand the contributions from the community. We're also working on an anti-Black racism strategy to bring that in and be proactive in terms of looking at how we build and support the community and really take proactive steps. We know as well activities taking place right across the province, led by the Black Business Council, really taking steps to support and really promote Black businesses. The Surrey Board of Trade also partnering with the Black Business Council in terms of really highlighting and showcasing the great work that Black businesses are doing here. Really incredible entrepreneurial spirit. And so lifting them up and promoting them are also a part of the importance of recognizing Black History Month and also supporting those businesses. We know as well that in terms of individuals really demonstrating excellence in the academic field, we have Dr. June Francis, who's leading efforts for the Anti-Racism Data Committee, really laying down the foundation in terms of how we bring forward an anti-racism agenda to collect that information, that demographic information, really leading towards as well steps to bring in the anti-racism legislation later this year, Madam Speaker. And these are steps to really address, to include and work with the Black community in terms of how we move forward to ensure that our province is being proactive to address that history, to recognize the incredible contributions from the community and how we work forward and move forward together to make change. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, member. Recognizing the member for Richmond North Centre.
The Honourable Speaker, I'd like to thank member from Vancouver Castleton for bringing up this private member statement to mark the Black History Month. Imagine walking through the streets of your community, such as mine, Richmond North Centre, where every storefront tells a story, not just of commerce, but of dreams, resilience, and a legacy of overcoming. Among this, a unique set of stories often remains unheard. Those of our Black-owned businesses embodying centuries of strength and innovation. Today, as we stand at the crossroads of history and hope during Black History Month in British Columbia, let us amplify these voices, celebrating their contributions and confronting the barriers they face. As a Shadow Minister for Multiculturalism, Anti-Racism Initiatives, Arts and Culture, and in the BC United Caucus, we know that in British Columbia, the contribution of Black entrepreneurs, artists, and community leaders have been instrumental, yet disproportionately unrecognized. February, when we mark Black History Month, offers us a lens to view our collective history through the achievements and challenges of Black Canadians, but also reminds us of the work yet to be done. In a time marked by economic instability and rising cost of living, the challenges faced by Black Canadians are not just remnants of history. They are urgent issues of today, with Black British Columbians and Black-owned businesses in BC facing unique hurdles. Despite their critical role in enriching our province's cultural and economic landscape, they encounter barriers to finance, mentorship, and market access, and are exasperated by the worsening reality of doing business. The Canadian Black Chamber of Commerce has highlighted that Black entrepreneurs frequently struggle to access capital, more so than the national average. Similarly, findings from the Black Business and Professional Association underscore that these entrepreneurs are more likely to encounter innovation and growth barriers. The Black in BC survey conducted in 2020 revealed that Black British Columbians are significantly more likely to experience discriminations in various facets of life, from the workplace to housing markets. Such disparities are not just statistics, they represent lived experiences that demand our attention and action. As we navigate through the highest cost of living in recent memory, with rents soaring and small businesses grappling with unprecedented challenges, the resilience of Black-owned business stands as a testament to their commitment to thriving against the odds. Yet, they should not have to face these hurdles alone. It's incumbent upon us to foster an environment that supports their growth and amplifies their success. Black Canadians have long encountered systematic injustices anchored in racism, prejudice, and hate. These injustices ensure that racialized individuals disproportionately bear the brunt of our system's shortcomings, be it in healthcare, education, public safety, or economic opportunity, worsening vulnerabilities at every turn. As I bring my statement to a close, I'm reminded of the profound legacies of resilience, innovation, and community that Black Canadians have contributed to our province's history and identity. Their relentless efforts have not only carved pathways for successive generations of Black Canadians, but have also illuminated the way for all Canadians, especially those of us from racialized communities such as myself and others. As the legislatures, our role extends beyond recognition to action. Honourable Speaker, let us pledge to not only celebrate and learn this Black History Month, but to embody its spirit throughout the year. Thank you, Honourable Speaker.
Thank you, Member. Recognizing the member for Vancouver-Kensington.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker, and I appreciate and respect the remarks from my colleague across the way in terms of really reflecting, I think, the sentiment of everyone in the House, recognizing and celebrating the contributions of Black British Columbians during February for Black History Month, certainly shared in terms of recognizing those contributions and recognizing the current barriers that continue to exist and the disproportionate impact that Black British Columbians face, whether it's in terms of pursuing employment or housing options, that there's more work that needs to be done. And certainly with the support, we need the support from everyone in the House, from every corner of the province in terms of being coming together as a society and taking steps to dismantle these barriers to benefit not only members of the Black community, but also lift all of us up. So February, recognizing Black History Month, an opportunity to do that. And really, we could talk, I think, all day on just the incredible contributions of so many in the Black community that have contributed to Canada and British Columbia. We know we're reminded when we're in the market in terms of seeing Viola Desmond on the $10 bill, really recognizing her from Nova Scotia as one of the leading civil rights activists in Canada, really reminding us of that important heritage. And to mark in terms of the remarks from my colleague around what needs to be done, more needs to be done in terms of addressing that reality, whether it's from entrepreneurs or it's from young people seeking careers in their chosen profession, advancing to senior leadership roles right across the public service and through the private sector, access to opportunities to employment. British Columbia has to take proactive steps to ensure that those those equal opportunities exist and are able to be practiced by everyone, including those in the Black community. And that's why the engagement is so critical, working together with the community, supporting their efforts and being informed by their experiences to ensure that our efforts going forward address their realities and can ensure that we're taking the right steps to provide those opportunities. So very excited about the opportunity that we have coming in this session, Madam Speaker, sometime soon, in terms of our efforts to bring in anti-racist legislation, working in partnership with members of the Black community and all racialized community, Indigenous nations as well, to look at how we inform collectively, to identify the barriers, take steps to ensure that those barriers are dismantled and that there's opportunities for everybody to celebrate Black History Month in February. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, member. Recognizing the member for Delta South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to speak on the significant challenges facing the BC wine industry and the dire need for support from our government. Madam Speaker, how many tourists have spent time on a warm Okanagan summer day partaking in a wine tour to Burrowing Owl, Quails Gate, Hester Creek, Poplar Grove, or Tantalus Vineyards? These visitors to our wine region contribute immensely with stays at our hotels, resorts, B&Bs, VRBOs, and enjoy spending some of their hard-earned money in local restaurants and ordering the odd case of BC VQA wine. The wines of British Columbia are some of the best you can sip anywhere on the globe. This world-class industry is a source of pride for British Columbians throughout our province. The vintners who produce these renowned products, like all farmers and growers throughout our agricultural sector, are some of the hardest working and most dedicated people I've ever had the pleasure of working with and meeting. From Vancouver Island to the Okanagan, from the Fraser Valley to the Kootenays and beyond, BC vineyards and wineries have been attracting visitors to our beautiful province and producing quality products enjoyed in BC and beyond for decades. This industry contributes a massive $3.75 billion to our provincial economy per year, in addition to the revenue directly generated by vineyards, wineries, and suppliers. The wine industry supports other industries integral to the economy of British Columbia, including tourism and hospitality. With wine tours and tastings attracting upwards of 1 million visitors annually to our wineries, generating over $600 million to our provincial economy. However, two recent and devastating events may point to a disappointing year for wine lovers and a dismal year for BC's wine industry and the people whose livelihoods depend on it. Just last month, Madam Speaker, BC was hit with a severe cold snap lasting up to 5 days in certain regions, including the southern interior. Temperatures reached as low as -25, decimating vines and buds. Reports coming out of the industry estimate production this year to be only 1 to 3% of typical yields, and they expect this production to be concentrated in areas unaffected by the cold snap, mainly Vancouver Island and the Fraser Valley. That means many vineyards are facing up to 100% crop loss, and countless wine producers are waiting with anxiety to find out in the coming months if the damage necessitates a need for replanting and starting over. That would mean no 2024 vintage and minimal or negligible cash flow for the next several years. The Okanagan Valley, representing 86% of BC's vineyard acreage, was hit especially hard by the extreme weather conditions. Cold snaps had devastating effects in 2023 as well, Madam Speaker, meaning that this is now the second consecutive year in which the industry has faced a significant crop loss. Last year, production was down by approximately half, with that figure expected to double this year given the increased duration and intensity of the cold snap, the mild winter immediately preceding it, and the compounding effects from previous years. This bleak outlook is put into perspective by projected profit losses of $346 million for vineyards and wineries, with an additional projected loss of $99 million for suppliers and distributors. That's a total of $445 million loss. But, Madam Speaker, those are just statistics which can help us comprehend the scale and severity of this crisis, but beyond those numbers are people. British Columbians, Madam Speaker, farmers, workers, hospitality employees, small business owners, folks whose livelihoods are dependent on the BC wine industry. Behind every bottle of Pinot Noir, Pinot Gris, Cab Franc, Riesling, or Merlot produced here every year are the hardworking people who rely on the production and sale of their products to put food on their tables. These folks are worried. They are scared they won't have the ability to provide for their families, a fear that many British Columbians are currently experiencing given the current cost of living crisis in our province. Government inaction is not an option when people's livelihoods are at stake. And if these extreme weather conditions weren't devastating enough, a recent decision coming out of Alberta has worsened this outlook. Alberta's decision to restrict direct-to-consumer sales of BC wines and pulling BC wines from shelves was unexpected, unwarranted, and completely unjustified with no legal basis whatsoever. Madam Speaker, residents of Alberta are huge summertime supporters of our tourism economy from the Shuswap right on down to Osoyoos and the Similkameen. Albertans have fallen in love with our BC wines and regularly join Okanagan wine clubs and regularly order, throughout the year, cases of their favorite BC wines directly to their doorsteps in Alberta. Alberta's decision risked having hugely detrimental effects, not only on the BC wine industry, but also on BC-Alberta trade relations overall, setting a dangerous precedent. We must not wait any longer for a resolution. The urgency of this precarious situation cannot be overstated, Madam Speaker. Alberta has decided to kick us while we are down, and this is absolutely unacceptable. We must take immediate action to solve this issue. Experts and industry professionals have been disappointed with the lack of response to this dire situation. Folks aren't feeling heard. That's why I'm bringing this issue to the floor of the House today as Shadow Minister for Agriculture and Food for BC United to amplify their voices and concerns. Government needs to listen to those with skin in the game who are calling for real action. Industry professionals recognize that crop insurance is not sufficient and they require additional support in these difficult times. The government must recognize this as well. These actions cannot wait. The government can no longer ignore the concerns of the wine industry professionals who have brought revenue and prestige to our province for many, many generations. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, member. Recognizing the member for Boundaries, Similkameen.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and thanks to the member from Delta South for those comments. Appreciate that. Arctic intrusion, cold snap, winter freeze, whatever you call it, this atypically extreme cold weather over the last couple of winters has been devastating for farmers in the southern interior. We often talk, as the member opposite has, about the economic impacts. I also want to say in the conversations that I've had with dozens and dozens of the wineries and similarly probably 50 different grape growers, the mental health impacts are enormous. I hear the sadness, I hear the anxiety, I hear the uncertainty in their voices when they talk about what is ahead. The Premier visited last fall. He was certainly gripped similarly by the stories being told by those wineries. The economic repercussions are certainly huge, as the member opposite alluded to, $3.75 billion as an estimate from a few years ago in terms of the economic impact of the industry. That industry supports a great deal of other secondary operations in the South Okanagan, certainly. The tourism sector is enormous, and much of that is built upon the wine industry. It employs thousands of people in BC, and so certainly this is something that we know is important for all of us. I'd also like to note this last winter event in January, this freeze event, isn't just about grapes. Cherries, plums, peaches, the soft fruit across my riding certainly have been impacted heavily. I know the member from Nelson Creston as well, and I have talked about the impacts to cherries, devastating there. From the Southern Interior Horticultural Show recently, talked to some of the cherry growers. They talked about the fact that this is looking to be a bigger impact than any other climate-related event the industry has faced before. As Peter Simonson, president of the Fruit Growers Association, said, we know our buds are damaged. We know many people will have absolutely no fruit. Back to the grape conversation as well. Farming in large part, of course, is about managing risks. I think about those risks in terms of 6 different categories for this conversation, in terms of climate, pests and pathogens, markets, the regulatory world we're in, water access and predictability, labor. All of these things are risks that farmers have to manage. Climate, in this case, is the top of the list. Back in 2021, when I was visiting Kismet Winery and Vineyards, I had the opportunity to have Deepinder Gill and Suki Dalawal show me their operations and how they're transitioning away from the grapes that were thriving 20 years ago, weren't performing that well because of climate change. I found that fascinating, and partly because of that shift in climate and the winter event from last year, the government did announce a perennial crop renewal program that helped in some degree, but we know that there's a need for much, much more. The last year, we saw $27 million being paid out to those growers for insurance supports to manage that climate risk. On the pest and pathogen side of things, we have the Tree Fruit Stabilization Plan. We see, for example, the ministry's work on regenerative agriculture. I've seen in the fields in the vineyards of Checkmate how that has helped them in terms of water management, for example. I've had the conversation with grape growers and the presidents who there about the opportunities for support there. The conversations around markets and the impacts on those economic sectors, and certainly had a conversation as well. The Minister for Tourism and Arts and Culture is engaged on that. In the regulatory world, certainly Crystalie McWaters and Miles Brodan as the Chair and CEO of Wine Growers of BC, and I've had many conversations working with the Minister for Public Safety and Solicitor General around how do we help modernize the regulatory environment there, get it out of an era that was built for something that existed 30 years ago to support operations, for example, like Oliver Wine Village, looking at opportunities like the single site license. I know, as the member opposite alluded to or spoke to, the challenges with Alberta trade disputes right now and the opportunities there. It's giving Albertans what they want, and it's giving what our BC producers a market that they want to have access to. So I have confidence that the ministers will be able to resolve that in a positive way. It's a win-win. I hear conversations around access to Washington grapes. The minister also is engaged on that and helping navigate and streamline that process. This is an enormously important industry for the South Okanagan. The Premier certainly recognizes that. After a couple weeks ago, he mentioned, after acknowledging the importance of the sector and the challenges of climate change.
Thank you, member.
He mentioned, quote, my assurance to farmers and farm communities of British Columbians is that we will be supporting those farmers as they rebuild. Thank you.
Thank you. Recognizing the member for Delta South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate the member's contribution to this important conversation, yet I fear they do not fully grasp the urgency of this situation or the extent of the fear and anxiety that countless British Columbians are facing regarding the future right now of our BC wine industry. As a farmer myself, I understand the high risk and volatility of the business of farming. I also understand what so many BC grape and tree fruit growers are struggling with right now. It is the understanding that allows me to work with industry professionals to propose necessary solutions that work for them, such as the establishment of an emergency working group with all levels of government, industry, and stakeholders, the creation of a Canadian VQA certification, the removal of barriers to the import of grapes from other provinces and Washington State, to include wines produced in our province made with 100% Canadian-grown grapes, and moving quickly to establish and fund an immediate replant program. Additionally, I understand the urgency of the need to work with our neighbours in Alberta to resolve this dispute as fairly and efficiently as possible. Regrettably, Madam Speaker, if government doesn't respond to these calls, the industry will sustain massive losses, the effects of which will be felt throughout the province, from wine growers to suppliers to tourism operators and hospitality employees. As we continue to experience the impacts of climate change, this will not be the last time that severe and unpredictable weather conditions result in massive losses in our agricultural sector. We have to prioritize sector supports and climate resilience today, not years from now. The industry is resilient, but as they face two simultaneous crises putting their collective futures at serious risk, government must step in and help. I invite all members of this House to recognize the urgency of this situation and to take decisive action to allow BC's wine industry to recover and flourish. I stand with wine growers and producers, and I will continue to fight for this industry, carrying with me an immense gratitude and respect for their contributions to our province's economy and global reputation as tremendous producers of wine here in British Columbia. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, member. Recognizing the member for Langford, Wanda Fuca.
Thanks very much, Madam Speaker. It's a pleasure to rise in the House this Monday morning to speak about the importance of Indigenous economic development, and welcome to the school group that's joined us in the chamber here this morning as well. Today, as part of this statement, I want to emphasize the critical importance of our government's support for Indigenous economic development. Indigenous peoples have historically faced significant economic challenges, including systemic barriers to employment, entrepreneurship, and access to capital. Our government has played a critical role and a crucial role, and I might add, needs to play a crucial role to play in fostering economic opportunities that empower Indigenous communities and First Nations to contribute to the overall prosperity of our province. That's why true, lasting, and meaningful reconciliation with Indigenous peoples is a key pillar of the Stronger BC Economic Plan, one of the 6 missions of the plan. And 3 components to that mission is working with Indigenous peoples to advance commitments towards reconciliation, and that's government to government, meaningful consultation and engagement, building that trust. The second part is partnering with First Nations and Indigenous communities to support new economic initiatives, and that means taking a step back, listening and learning, and always following the lead. And as I think of that particular aspect of that mission, I also think of respecting traditions, cultures, and customs, something that I take back in my relationship with the Sauk First Nations, and in particular, my relationship with former Chief Gordon Planis, who always shared with me the importance of thinking a generation ahead as they look to do their economic development work on clean energy and fisheries. And third, critically important, is acknowledging, respecting, and upholding Indigenous rights, including First Nations title, ensuring Indigenous control of their land and resources in accordance with the principles outlined in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, UNDRIP, a framework that was passed into law unanimously here in British Columbia, and British Columbia continues to be one of only a handful of jurisdictions in North America to do so. It's also important to recognize the fundamental importance of Indigenous sovereignty and self-determination in all decisions regarding land use and resource management as enshrined in UNDRIP and upheld by various legal precedents. And that's what the Stronger BC Economic Plan speaks to, and it is what our government has been committed to delivering on ever since we formed government in 2017. One of the key actions of the Stronger BC Economic Plan in 2022 was a really critical partnership and following the lead of the BC Assembly of First Nations. In 2022, our government launched the new Centre of Excellence in First Nations Economic Development, which was established to help advance the role of First Nations in BC's inclusive economy and to work towards true and lasting reconciliation. And speaking to the importance of this announcement, Regional Chief Terry Teegee of the BC Assembly of First Nations said, and I quote, "First Nations in BC have been advocating for economic reconciliation for decades, and the Centre of Excellence demonstrates progress towards this goal. I'm pleased that the provincial government has chosen to support this project, and I'm proud of the work done by First Nations and the BCAFN to bring this project to fruition. The Centre of Excellence will multiply the investment First Nations are making to close the socioeconomic gap and bring us the prosperity we rightfully deserve." End quote. This action, this critical action, aligns directly with the Declaration Act Action Plan. The Centre plays a crucial role in enhancing the capacity of First Nations in British Columbia to actively participate in economic priorities and initiatives by empowering First Nations and Indigenous communities with knowledge, resources, and strategic guidance. The Centre contributes significantly to advancing Indigenous economic development and fostering sustainable prosperity within Indigenous communities across British Columbia. When I think of Indigenous economic development, I just have to look at the nations that I have the honour of working with in Langford, Juan de Fuca. I touched on the Sauk First Nations. I also want to recognize the Pacheedaht First Nations and the work that they've been doing to build a vibrant and value-added forestry industry for their next generation, to ensure that the people that are studying and going to school at Port Renfrew Elementary have a way to be able to work in a value-added forest industry. And I want to recognize former Chief Jeff Jones for all the work that he's done in partnership with his nation. I think many have seen the incredible work that the Malahat Nation have been doing in the last number of years in partnership with Vancouver's Energy Plug Corp. This was just announced a little while ago. The Malahat First Nations, in partnership with Energy Corp, is building Canada's biggest battery factory. The new battery factory is expected to be completed in 2025. I understand that shovels are going to be in the ground very soon, and this is going to create more than 100 local jobs, many for the nation. And again, I want to take an opportunity to acknowledge Chief Harry and the Council for their leadership. But that's not all. I had an opportunity just a couple of weeks to be at Brentwood College to be able to witness an incredible partnership between the Malahat First Nations and Alpha Select Production Services, where over a number of years the nation has been working with this production services company based here in Victoria to build the world's greenest and cleanest film studio, on an 85-acre site, which could see as many as 6 sound stages of up to 36,000 square feet each, several production workshops, as well as a commercial complex with a hotel and other services that could feed and house movie crews, as British Columbia and certainly Vancouver Island is making itself known as a destination to attract that type of investment. Madam Speaker, I'll just end with saying that Indigenous communities have deep connections to their lands and waters, making them natural stewards of the environment. Supporting Indigenous-led economic projects often aligns with the principles of sustainability and environmental stewardship. Through partnerships with Indigenous communities, the BC government can and must promote responsible resource development and sustainable practices that benefit both the economy and the environment. Supporting Indigenous economic development is not just a moral imperative, it's a strategic investment in the future prosperity of British Columbia. It's always been a priority for our government, it's a priority for British Columbians, and I know that we're going to keep working hard by partnering with Indigenous communities, respecting Indigenous rights, and fostering economic opportunities so we can build a more inclusive, sustainable, and prosperous province for all. Thanks very much.
Thank you, member. Recognizing the member for Skeena.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We're talking about Indigenous economic development. And this conversation is 20 years too late. I'm glad the NDP government finally caught up to the rest of BC and Canada, but this is exactly what the Haida Court case was about in 2004. The inescapable economic component that has to be addressed when you're dealing with rights and title. And when we were dealing with this, with the government at the time, the BC Liberals, and the First Nations across BC, it wasn't easy. We were trying to figure out what consultation and accommodation meant. And we made mistakes. And there was bad feelings, but we stuck to it. We kept going back to the table. It didn't help that the NDP were in the background actually opposing LNG. The NDP are now talking about how they support Indigenous economic development, and yet LNG was First Nations driven. It was our idea. We forced this on BC and Canada. So for the NDP to sign anti-declarations, LNG anti-declarations, kind of goes against what they're talking about here today. This narrative still exists. The last time we debated LNG in a context of Indigenous economic development, a member of the NDP government said, and I quote, "If we want forward-looking and effective economic independence for First Nations, if we want good jobs for our children's children, in a world that is safe and secure, then all indicators are that future LNG expansion isn't the answer." End quote. That is not supporting Indigenous economic development, especially when you consider Niska, LNG, their pipeline certificate is going to expire this year. If it doesn't get renewed, they got to start over. And getting a certificate in BC costs millions and millions of dollars. This can be fixed easily by Northern Council. renew Niska's pipeline certificate. McLeod Lake, they're going to take a byproduct from LNG and produce ammonia and hydrogen. Fast track them. If you truly believe in the words that you're saying, fast track McLeod Lake's ammonia plant. Frog Lake, First Nation, plans to ship ammonia to Prince Rupert. That can be fast tracked. And it can be done in partnership with Canada because it's going to come up by rail. Kitsilas, First Nation, my territory, has been waiting for approval for geothermal for close to 10 years. They can't get an approval. Geothermal, the cleanest energy possible. Issue their permit. They've got a similar problem in Valemount. You want clean energy, you want First Nations, Indigenous economic development to flourish, issue the permits. You don't need any grand speeches. You don't need any grand plan. Issue permits. In fact, if anything, Halfway River and Doig River are now taking the BC government to court over the Blueberry Agreement, saying that the BC government transferred rights from Doig and Halfway River and transferred it to Blueberry. Why this matters is because the overlap at issue here contains economic components. In fact, Halfway River says the BC government knowingly transferred atmospheric benefits from their territory to Blueberry's territory, meaning carbon credits. Now, for a band under the Indian Act, a very restrictive funding agreement that doesn't allow for economic development, that means something. Under the Indian Act, First Nations cannot pursue any kind of economic development. That's why 2004 Haida court case was so important. We wrote the book on it. We wrote the protocol on it. We shouldn't start over. You should build what was being built in BC by First Nations and the Crown for the last 20 years and build on it. And don't exclude gas and oil projects. If you truly believe in economic development for First Nations and you want to finance and loan guarantees, don't exclude oil and gas. Because it's hard to replace one First Nations community's funding agreement that could be at a minimum $5 to $7 million. It's hard to replace that with economic development. We come a long ways. For the last 18 years, we've had Peace in the Forest, or the Forest and Range Agreements that was signed between the BC Liberals and First Nations. We have the LNG Canada Agreement, the Chevron Agreement that left town, and now we got Haisla Cedar. We come a long ways. Let's not destroy it.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Member.
Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Member. Recognizing the member for Langford, Wanda Fuca.
Thanks very much, Madam Speaker. Always a pleasure to be able to respond to the comments from the member across the way, the MLA for Skeena. I want to thank him for his words, thank him for his leadership. I know that this is going to be his last session before, hopefully, in his case, bigger and better things at the federal scene, if things work out for him. But I just want to thank him for his words and, of course, the important work that he's been doing on Indigenous economic development his entire life, whether that is in this House or as the chief of his nation. I certainly agree with many of the perspectives that he shared, and I know that in the throne speech and in the budget, we talked about Cedar LNG and the approvals and the important work that project is going to mean for British Columbia, but more importantly for the Haisla Nation. And I've had an opportunity over the number of years that I've had an opportunity to work in this building to listen to in a number of settings, Chief Smith, Crystal Smith from the Haisla Nation, and talk about the importance of that project for her people from an economic development perspective, but also from a social perspective as well. So I want to thank the member across the way for those comments. I also want to touch on, as it was mentioned in the budget, and I know that more details will follow, is that it's been a really important work that the province, the Minister of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation, as well as the Minister of Finance have been doing on partnering with Indigenous peoples to co-develop measures that better support self-determination and building on the incredible partnerships work with the Nisga'a Nation and the Modern Treaty Nations. Budget 2024 lays out a new approach to assessment by fully withdrawing from property taxation on Nisga'a lands and treaty lands and removing the requirement for property taxation to apply. And I know in the limited time I have, I also want to acknowledge the new First Nations equity financing framework with a $10 million inaugural balance, but know that the new equity financing tools that were created as part of Budget 2024 has the ability to be able to have a cumulative loan guarantee limit of $1 billion, and that's something that's going to be reviewed annually. These new equity financing tools will support inclusive project partnerships and will continue to support First Nations self-determination and meaningful participation in economic development. Certainly on this side of the House, we know how important that is. We know that there are people on the other side of the House. I don't think the member is one of those individuals, but certainly we've seen it from the Conservative Party that have gone to extreme measures to knowingly and mislead the public on these important initiatives that our government is focused on, and we're not going to let them take away from the important work that we need to do on this file. So thanks very much to the member. Thanks for the discussion this morning.
Thank you. Recognizing the member for Prince George Valemount.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And today I rise to speak to an issue that is significantly affecting British Columbians no matter where they live in our province. It's an issue that demands not only our attention, but a sense of urgency and hopefully concrete action, because British Columbians deserve nothing less. All over the province, British Columbians are feeling overwhelmed and hopeless about the state of healthcare in our province. Nearly 1 million people, or almost 1 in 5 British Columbians, do not have a family doctor. And we know that having a primary care provider that gets to know you and can recognize changes in your health over time means better outcomes. Without a family doctor, many British Columbians are forced to rely on walk-in clinics as their only source of primary care, meaning they have to wait for hours for anything that is not urgent enough for an emergency room. A visit to an ER would also take hours if that ER isn't on diversion or closure. Access to timely medical attention is a fundamental right, but sadly, with the current situation, it is not the reality for many British Columbians. As we speak, people are waiting as long as 187 minutes, more than 3 hours on average, Madam Speaker, to see a doctor at a walk-in clinic. And it's not like people living in BC can afford the time to wait. They have busy lives. They have families, careers, commitments. When faced with medical concerns, British Columbians should not have to face hours of waiting to access a walk-in clinic to see a doctor. But that has become the norm in our province. According to a recently released report, British Columbia now gets to boast about the longest walk-in clinic wait times in the entire country. Let that sink in. The longest walk-in clinic wait times in Canada. Clearly, Madam Speaker, there is something seriously broken in our system, and the people of this province are not getting the quality care they need and deserve in a timely way. The recent report on walk-in clinic wait times released by Medimap paints a devastating picture of healthcare in British Columbia. Last year, British Columbians had to wait an average of 93 minutes to see a doctor, 25 minutes longer than the national average of 68 minutes. In North Vancouver, wait times were the highest of the cities that were included in the study, at a shocking 187 minutes on average, Madam Speaker. Our capital city, Victoria, had the second longest wait times, with people waiting 107 minutes to see a doctor. These walk-in clinic wait times are a major issue of concern, and much more needs to be done to address the ever-increasing wait times. Let's look at the BC situation a little more closely when you consider other jurisdictions in our country. The next highest wait time is a full 21 minutes shorter than in BC, and in fact, that's in Nova Scotia. They report a 71-minute average. Alberta clocks in at 66 minutes, while the average wait time in Manitoba is half of that in BC, at only 45 minutes. Such significant delays have eroded people's trust in the healthcare system, trust that's already been damaged by the lack of family doctors, the crisis in cancer care, and frequent ER closures. British Columbians deserve and need timely care and support, and the recent wait time report is just another measure of how badly we are failing them. And while the report captures a number of larger centres in our province, it does not report out on the situation in smaller and more rural communities. We know that the wait times are likely even longer. Since the report was released, I have heard from people in Chilliwack, Campbell River, Prince George, and many other places that the waits are significantly longer where they live, if they don't get turned away or can get in at all. The escalating crisis of walk-in clinic wait times in our province demands our immediate attention. Since 2019, wait times have more than doubled, and there is sadly no improvement on the horizon. By making an already bad situation worse, this issue is putting an even more intense strain on our healthcare professionals, and all of us know they are already at their limit, stretched thin, and overloaded. And Madam Speaker, they are working tirelessly every single day to keep the healthcare system functioning. So many of them, in discussions that we have had, talk about moral distress and even moral trauma as they struggle to care for people. Compounding this problem, many medical clinics across the province have been forced to turn away walk-in patients, and some even closing due to physician shortages. Nowhere is this more evident than in Victoria, where an increasing number of clinics have stopped accepting walk-in patients, leaving the clinics that remain open to shoulder overwhelming demand. When British Columbians do find a walk-in clinic that is operating, demand can be so high that the clinic has already reached full capacity just minutes after opening its doors. In fact, in Victoria, it is not uncommon to find that nearly all of the clinics are full by 9 a.m. and are no longer taking patients. In fact, as we speak, according to Medimap, 4 of the urgent and primary care centres in Victoria are listed at capacity as of 9:45 a.m. this morning. Whether it's Gorge, James Bay, Esquimalt, or North Quadra, they are already at capacity this morning. How on earth are British Columbians who need medical attention supposed to navigate such a challenging situation? And let's not forget that British Columbia was once celebrated for having the best outcomes and healthcare system in Canada. Sadly, as this report points out, we continue to slip down the ranks as we struggle to keep up with a collapsing system. British Columbians not only need, but deserve a healthcare system that ensures reasonable and timely access to care.
Thank you, member. Recognizing the member for North Vancouver Seymour.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to acknowledge that I am on the ancestral territories of the Lekwungen people, the Songhees and the Esquimalt nations. And when I'm in my riding of North Vancouver Seymour, I work, live and learn in the territories of the Tsleil-Waututh and Squamish nations. There's been unprecedented growth in the demand for healthcare services over the past 5 years. And we recognize the importance of walk-in clinics and urgent and primary care clinics for those without a family physician, which is why our government continues to make significant investments in recruiting, retaining, and educating physicians, nurses, and other healthcare professionals to meet the needs of our healthcare system. We're taking actions in recruitment to tackle a problem that's nearly 2 decades in the making, and we are making progress in recruiting more healthcare professionals. Since 2017, BC has welcomed more than 38,000 healthcare providers to the healthcare system. In 2023, BC saw over 700 more family doctors, and over 6,000 more nurses were newly registered. More than 7,000 healthcare support workers have been hired throughout the Health Careers Access Program, known as HCAP, including over 2,000 in 2023. On June 1st of 2023, the pharmacist's scope of practice was expanded to allow them to prescribe for 21 minor ailments and contraceptives. This means that for mild minor ailments such as pink eye, simple UTIs, shingles, and more, people in BC can visit their local pharmacist to meet their care needs rather than having to go to their family physician. You can book an appointment online, over the phone, or walk into a local pharmacy. This change has made it even easier and faster for people throughout the province to access the care they need, allows the pharmacists to use their expertise, and reduces the strain on doctors' offices and clinics. Our Health Human Resources strategy includes unprecedented expansion to medical education in BC to ensure that we are training more healthcare professionals in our province. BC has added 602 nursing seats to post-secondary institutions across the province, an increase of more than 30%. We have doubled the number of nurse practitioner seats since 2017. We have increased the number of licensed practical nursing seats by 46%. And we are expanding postgraduate or residency programs and undergraduate medical education programs across the province. To build capacity in our system and ensure that we have new generations of doctors ready to practice in BC, our government is also building a brand new medical school at Simon Fraser University in their Surrey campus, which will be the first new medical school in Western Canada in over 50 years. We are making changes that are attracting and retaining healthcare professionals across the board within our healthcare system, to make it easier for patients to gain access to the care that they need. Our government has signed incredibly successful agreements with physicians, nurses, midwives, and paramedics in the past year. And with our healthcare partners, the ministry has introduced a new payment model for longitudinal family physicians in February of 2023. This model has been very successful, with thousands of physicians signing on to the model, and has already brought hundreds of more doctors into family practice. And we have recruited more nurse practitioners into our primary care system to help patients receive the care they need. We are opening more urgent and primary care clinics across the province for people to receive help with their primary care needs. And we're pleased that we've connected hundreds of thousands of people to primary care since we launched our team-based care strategy in 2018. But we also know that we have plenty more work in front of us. We know that people are struggling to find family doctors, and that's why we're making it easier for people in BC to get connected with a primary care provider. In July of 2023, our government launched the Health Connect Registry, a patient attachment system province-wide. I encourage people to register with the Health Connect Registry so we can help connect you with a provider. While it takes time to strengthen our healthcare system and to make up the nearly 2 decades of underfunding, we are making progress. We know there is more to do to support people in our healthcare system, which is why we're not stopping, and we will continue to invest in BC's public healthcare system, supporting patients and healthcare workers. Thank you.
Thank you, member. Recognizing the member for Prince George Valemount.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I would encourage the speaker before me to go back and check the math related to funding for the healthcare system. I would also like to point out that while the members opposite like to use the language, the first new medical schools, let me be perfectly clear that there were new medical training programs in British Columbia. Let's just take a look at University of Northern British Columbia in Prince George, Victoria, and Kelowna. All of those programs were brand new in this province, so nice try on the 50 years. That's just utterly ridiculous. Madam Speaker, you know, those numbers, that is exactly why British Columbians have lost faith in the healthcare system we have today. Because to stand up in this legislature when the most recent report made it painfully clear that walk-in clinic wait times are the worst in Canada. That's exactly what the report said. Not me, not the opposition, but in fact, the latest report shows that everyone in British Columbia, we are facing the longest wait times in this country. And as we speak, If you walk down the street to James Bay or go to Quadra or anywhere else, we have walk-in clinics that are currently at capacity as of 9:45 a.m. this morning. This situation in British Columbia is dire. We have the longest walk-in clinic wait times in the country. We regularly, in rural and northern communities, have ERs that are closed or on diversion, in the middle of the winter no less, on major highways. That's the accomplishment that the member previous should perhaps have noted. We should be clear about this. Lives are being profoundly affected, and in some cases, tragically lost due to a healthcare system under incredible pressure that is unable to provide the support British Columbians need, and when they need it now. The time has come to acknowledge that we have a crisis, and we must address the escalating crisis of walk-in clinic wait times in British Columbia. The urgency of reducing those walk-in clinic wait times cannot be overstated. And let's be clear, the current predicament has led to people suffering and even potentially losing their lives as they wait. We must work harder and take proactive measures to enhance the training of medical professionals, retaining our family doctors, and expanding walk-in clinic capacity across British Columbia. We should be clear, it is unacceptable that British Columbians are faced with the highest walk-in clinic wait times in the country, and that doctors who have done so much for all of us are forced to shoulder this burden. It's time to make a difference, to prioritize this issue. Frankly, British Columbians cannot afford to wait.
Thank you, member. Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask that the House consider proceeding with motion number 5, standing in the name of the member for Maple Ridge Mission.
Members, unanimous consent of the House is required to proceed to motion 5 without disturbing the priorities of the motions preceding it on the order paper. Is leave granted? Aye. All right, please proceed. I recognize the member for Maple Ridge Mission to move the motion.
Well, thank you very much, Honourable Speaker. Be it resolved that this House agrees to put the interests of regular people who are looking to afford a home ahead of real estate speculators and investors. Now, the story prior to 2017 is we had a government that believed that we should rely on the market, that the market would fix everything. And what that led to, Honourable Speaker, was rampant speculation, money laundering in the real estate market, housing being used as a stock market, which frankly, Honourable Speaker, is exactly what, when the opposition was in government, the multi-million-dollar developer donors that they had wanted. But the housing market should be first and foremost there to provide homes for people. And when we took office, Honourable Speaker, there were huge gaps in the continuum of housing. The rental supply, student housing, empty condos and houses, seniors housing, supportive housing. And we committed with our 30-point plan to 114,000 homes, of which we are on the path with 77,000 homes opening or open. Now there are, to break this down, there's BC housing programs, there's 35,747, student housing, nearly 8,000. Now the opposition froze this. I remember when I was the chair of the Finance Committee, that universities and colleges were begging to build student housing that they had on the books for years. And we allowed this to happen, and now there's nearly 8,000 units. Now, this frees up market rentals for working people and gives affordable housing to students. Now, in terms of policy, a speculation and vacancy tax put over 20,000 units back on the market. The vacant condos were sitting empty, and they were just investments. There was the building code changes for secondary suites, the ban on strata rental restrictions, and those all added up to over 34,000 units. Now, the opposition always talks about results. Well, let me tell you that there are tangible results in my riding, Honourable Speaker, with partnerships with nonprofits, the cities, and BC Housing. There's the Boswick Centre, which is seniors housing with MASH, MSCA, and the City of Mission, that languished on the books for 10 years until we got into government and helped this happen. The Heard Street supportive housing, that is being built now. The Cedar Valley Suites with Lookout Society. And in Maple Ridge, the Garibaldi Heights Supportive Housing, Honourable Speaker, on Burnett Avenue, and Royal Crescent, which was workforce housing that was brought in to resolve our tent city. And that is being replaced with permanent housing, and the city is already working on seniors housing for that with BC Housing. There's Cornerstone Landing with community services, there's Turnock Manor and Air Development as well for middle-income housing. But there's so much more to be done, Honourable Speaker. So we're expanding the speculation and vacancy tax to 13 more communities. And we have legislation curtailing individual rezoning hearings for development approvals by updating OCP and having matching zoning. This is a game changer, Honourable Speaker. This will speed things up incredibly. And with that, an amenity cost charge that will help municipalities fund the infrastructure they need. Legislation allowing the building of multiple units on single-family lots. This is a huge change. Legislation regulating an out-of-control short-term rental market. And for renters, a $400 renter tax credit, $11 million of new money for the rent bank, capping annual rental increases at a reasonable rate, and enhancing services to the residential tenancy branch to help both landlords and tenants with bad actors. Now, there's also legislation coming increasing density around transit hubs, which is huge. We're spending billions of dollars, Honourable Speaker, on transit. We should be building housing around that and having higher density. And in Budget 2024, we're providing property transfer tax relief for first-time homebuyers. This could save up to $8,000 for new homebuyers. And quite frankly, this is a lot better than the half-baked rent-to-own plan that the Leader of the Opposition proposed. And now, Honourable Speaker, we have the exciting BC Builds program. It says $4 billion in partnership with the federal government, which will allow us to build on government lands that are sitting vacant or not being used. And this is a lot better than what the opposition used to do, which was sell land to balance their books. So we can use this land to tackle the housing crisis. So, Honourable Speaker, there's lots more work to do, but we're well on the way to work with our partners, the cities, the nonprofits, the churches, the for-profits, and now the federal government to provide the needed housing supply across the whole continuum of housing. The whole continuum of housing, rental housing, seniors housing, student housing, all of the things that were missing for so many years. We're working on that. Thank you, Honourable Speaker.
Member. Member for West Vancouver, Capilano.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Today's motion from the members opposite, well, seemingly well-intentioned, rings fairly hollow in light of the harsh realities that are being faced right now by British Columbians. And this is after 7 years of this NDP government. So to talk about all the great things that this government has been doing with respect to housing, when we are, 6, 7 months out of an election, the timing for that is perhaps a little bit too late. The rhetoric we've heard today doesn't match the dire situation on the ground, where affordability and accessibility to housing have reached absolutely crisis levels under this NDP government. And while the members opposite may certainly intend to, and I'll quote, put regular people looking to afford a home ahead of speculators, investors, unquote, this NDP government's actions have certainly not done that. Under the NDP, we have witnessed the most unaffordable housing market in North America develop right in our backyard. Rents have skyrocketed to the highest in all of Canada. Homelessness has surged to record highs, and the dream of homeownership, Mr. Speaker, has been pushed further away from the grasp of young people, or the grasp of, to use the government's own term, regular people. This government's track record speaks volumes. Despite 7 years of this government being in power, their approach to housing has been characterized by a lack of accountability and a lack of actual concrete results. The budget for 2024 presented us with more of the same. Lofty promises without the action needed to make a substantial difference in the lives of British Columbians. I think back to 7 years ago, the number 114,000 units, new units, not reclassified units, would be created by this government. I think we're at, 13,000, 14,000. So with that kind of track record, I'm wondering how we can believe anything that this government is telling us in terms of their ability to actually create create housing. But a results-driven approach is not the only difference between the leaders of our two parties. And it is this Premier who has actually engaged in speculation. So weeks before the Premier would have had to declare his condo for speculation tax, he flipped it. You know it's true. He flipped it and raked in a cool $150,000 profit. I'm upset too. I hear you're upset. For all his talk about speculators, perhaps he should look in the mirror. The Premier's apartment also happened to market itself as an Airbnb opportunity, boasting an Airbnb concierge, profiting off the fact that it could be used as a short-term rental when he sold it, which would, of course, increase the value to sell it for. It was priced accordingly, but unfortunately, the other regular people in that building were not so fortunate when that same building was then included in a ban on short-term rentals and their housing prices plummeted or values plummeted overnight. These are the units that the Premier previously owned in. Talk about hypocrisy. Now, this is why we don't trust this government is acting in the best interest of British Columbians. I think some of the members on the other side of the House, I hope they're going to be responding to this, because I certainly have a lot to say about it. This is why we do not trust this government. The people of West Vancouver, Capilano, you want to talk about supportive housing on the North Shore. I'd love you to come and tour through what's going on over there right now. The people of West Vancouver, Capilano, and indeed all of British Columbians deserve more than this rhetoric. They deserve decisive actions, a result-driven policy like our rent-to-own program that will turn renters into homeowners by converting rental payments into down payments. We believe in giving people a hand up for their ability to see a real and true future for themselves. We're going to have solutions rooted in practical policies, making entering the market a reality, such as our commitment to slashing the property transfer tax for first-time owners, and this will help buyers save up to $10,000 more than the NDP's own plan. So while I had much more to say, Mr. Speaker, the NDP is happy putting our province in a massive deficit with no way out, and that's going to impact our housing market. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Nelson Creston.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Now, I know how hard it is for people to find housing. I had a friend call me up in tears because the rental that she was occupying, she was getting evicted. And so I went over there and I was helping her box up all of her belongings. And, you know, she's a professional. She has her master's. She works for government, but she hasn't been able to buy a home and she hasn't been able to secure housing. I'm hearing from people, you know, in my generation, but also people with disabilities, people who are marginalized, and people who've made a decent salary, but that salary has not increased at the same rate as housing prices. Our governments used to build housing, but that stopped in the 90s. So now we are in a time where we need a Herculean effort, and that is exactly what our government is doing with all of the measures that we have announced recently. What I'm hearing from people, from a friend in Creston, that because of our government's work on short-term rentals, a house that was a short-term rental went on the market, and now him and his 3 daughters are able to occupy that home and that space. He told me he has never seen a government's actions that have so directly and so quickly impacted his life for the betterment of his family. And he's a teacher. He's teaching our young people. And teachers, nurses, construction workers, these are all people that need homes. And the BC Builds program is going to be supporting people like small business owners with housing that is appropriate, accessible, and that they can afford. I am absolutely thrilled by the work and the leadership of our Premier to deliver more homes for people. Because we know with the last government, as they watched the commodification of housing, there were so many people that were in despair, not knowing how they were ever going to be able to afford a home. When they moved or needed a different rental space because their family was growing, they couldn't find anything affordable. And what I'm hearing from people across the Kootenays and in British Columbia, that this gives them a lot of hope. They know that there will be a home in their community that they can afford for them. And we have so many incredible groups that have been stepping up. We're not only, it's not only the province, we can't do this alone, but we're seeing municipalities stepping up and the federal government. We know how historically challenging it can be to get funding from the federal government, but they see this as a real opportunity to invest with people, and that's why with the nearly $3 billion that our government is investing in the BC Builds program, that we have the federal government stepping up with another $2 billion. This is going to make significant impacts in people's lives in my community, but also across the province. I was in Caslow last summer, and it was incredible as we opened 10 units for people in the absolutely beautiful community of Caslow. And that had been a project that the Caslow Housing Society had been working on for over 20 years. And it is because our government, unlike previous governments, is investing in homes for people. The Nelson Care Society and the Share Housing Initiative, they've delivered 3 separate buildings of housing for people in our communities. This is benefiting the workers, this is benefiting seniors, this is benefiting families, and this is benefiting people with disability that all work together to create such vibrant and beautiful communities, and we need places and homes for them. We also have the Kootenay Regional Association for Community Living, and there's a new housing centre for people with disabilities in Creston. And one of the residents there said that when he got his new home, that this is one of the best moments of his life. And as we're building homes for people and more people are walking in to their homes that have stability for the first time, potentially in their lives, I can't wait to hear more of those stories of how we're transforming British Columbia with this Herculean effort by our Premier. Thank you.
Member. Member for Surrey South.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Thank you. First of all, to the member from Nelson Creston, sorry to hear that your friend can't afford their home under your government. That is why the official opposition absolutely wants to ensure that people who need an affordable home can get one. We want to ensure that those who also have the dream of home ownership can achieve their dreams right here in our province. That's why a BC United government will implement an innovative rent-to-own program that will require developers of new housing to set aside up to 15% of homes in participating projects. These homes will be available for eligible British Columbians who are looking to buy their first-time home. Their rent will be based at market value for 3 years, with 100% of the payments being applied towards their down payment, allowing buyers to pause on the housing market while they save. This is how you get results, Mr. Speaker, by unlocking the door for individuals who are looking to enter the housing market and giving them the resources they need to compete with today's skyrocketing costs. It's a great initiative, which is probably why shortly after it was announced, the government's Minister of Housing incorrectly stated in the Victoria Times columnist that the NDP plan will also eventually have a home ownership component, implying that the NDP as well knows that this is a great idea, but then only to turn around and accuse first-time homebuyers of being speculators in last week's question period. And to hear the criticism coming from that side of the House, it's hard not to see their gross hypocrisy, especially considering that MLAs on that side own 102 properties and have profited by almost $8.5 million in real estate sales. People who are looking to get into their first homes don't deserve to be accused of real estate speculation. They're looking for assistance to try to achieve housing security in a province that's become the most expensive in our country and the highest housing prices in North America, all under this government. The latest affordability report from the National Bank of Canada says for a median household to save a down payment, it would be a minimum of 36 years to buy a home here in BC. And since more than half of British Columbians are less than $200 away from being able to pay their bills, it's not likely that they have a savings account. That's why BC United is also going to continue to support first-time home buyers by eliminating the property transfer tax on properties valued up to $1 million. This means $18,000 in savings for individuals and families who are just starting out. The BC United government plan isn't just about increasing buyers, as the government would have you believe. Our party has always maintained that we need to dramatically increase housing supply. This is why we will remove the provincial sales tax on all new residential construction, making it cheaper to build homes across the housing ecosystem, more rentals included. We're also going to build more housing by using unused public land to offer nonprofit and market home builders 99-year leases at $1 a year, and this will enable construction of rental housing that will be available below market prices. While that side of the House may not have been bold enough to act over the last 7 years, BC United will ensure we get housing for British Columbians. In closing, I'd like to note that wherever I go, I hear the same thing, that people are tired of how unaffordable life has become under this NDP government. The impacts of their financial incompetence is having significant impacts for people. British Columbians expect more from their government. British Columbians deserve better from their government. That's why, United, we will fix it. Thank you.
Member for Richmond, Steveston.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I rise today to speak in favour of the motion, be it resolved that this House agree to put the interests of regular people who are looking to afford a home ahead of real estate speculators and investors. First, I'd like to recognize that I am privileged to be speaking on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people, the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations. Honourable Speaker, homes should be for people to live in, to grow roots in their community, and to feel secure about building a future there. In my community of Richmond, we've felt the effects that speculation and short-term rentals have had on our housing market. Homes are used as safe deposit boxes, not a place for families to live, and short-term rentals are pushing residents out of houses, townhouses, and condos alike. That's why our government is taking action to get people into homes. With our close proximity to the airport, Richmond has long struggled with short-term rentals. While the City of Richmond has banned short-term rentals, they need our help. Our government has enabled more tools for local governments to combat illegal short-term rentals and increase the fines for non-compliance. Short-term rental platforms will share their data with the province to assist with local enforcement, and the province is limiting short-term rentals to principal residents only. These changes will return thousands of units to the long-term rental market so people can have more housing options in their community. We also see in Richmond the use of homes as an investment vehicle. Having homes sitting vacant when there is so much need for housing in our community is not okay. Since 2018, the speculation and vacancy tax has encouraged more than 20,000 units to be returned to the long-term rental market in Metro Vancouver alone. The speculation and vacancy tax continues to discourage the use of homes for investors' piggy banks and instead to be used for what should be the primary purpose of housing, a place for people, for families, for seniors to live. For those investors that still leave their properties vacant, the speculation and vacancy tax raises millions of dollars that's used to build new, affordable housing in the communities taxes collected in. Partnering with the City of Richmond, we've built 80 units of supportive housing so that unhoused people can get the support and shelter they need. In the supporting housing units, folks are accessing services that improve their quality of life, like a daily hot meal, life skills training, mental health care, and primary health care services. BC Housing is starting the process for redevelopment of Rosewood Village at Number 2 Road and Blundell Roads in Richmond. It's an over 9-acre site and currently offers 138 housing units. The proposed development will replace the existing units on a one-for-one basis and will have over 850 units on completion. Rosewood Village will prioritize community connection, spaces outdoors, as well as an amenity building for the development. Affordability is an important aspect for BC housing projects, and Rosewood Village will offer rental housing for families, low and moderate income earners, and persons with disabilities, and will be a mix of rent geared to income, non-market, and market rentals. The site is ideal for densification as it's adjacent to a shopping plaza with a grocery store, shops and services, as well as frequent transit and an elementary school. This is a great example of what it means to build a complete and walkable community. We need to keep leveraging underutilized land to deliver more low-cost rental homes faster. BC Builds will offer low-cost financing along with land owned by government, community groups, or nonprofits to bring down building costs, which will get more projects launched and deliver rental homes that are affordable for low and middle income earners. It's so important that government continue to do this work so that our communities are vibrant and thrive for the next generation of residents. We need to ensure that everyone, like teachers, medical technicians, and early childhood educators, can find a place to call home in the communities they live and work in, like Richmond. The status quo was not serving the families, seniors, and families of British Columbia. We believe that homes are for people to live in, and we're taking action to address the housing challenges of today. We're getting speculation out of our housing market, limiting short-term rentals, and building thousands of units for students, seniors, individuals, and families. Our actions mean that more people have the opportunity to build a good life in the community they love, ensuring our neighborhoods are healthy and thriving places to learn, work, and grow for years to come. Thank you, Speaker.
Member for Kelowna Mission.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Well, only an NDP government would give already struggling British Columbians a week filled with nothing but an uninspiring, over-politicized and solution-free budget announcement, and then ironically follow it up with a motion that, if anything, only mocks this government's abysmal track record. A failure at building 114,000 units in over 8 years. BC Housing is a financial disaster. And now this new housing suite of bills has thrown chaos into planning departments around the province. The record-breaking deficit announced last week does not serve the interests of, and I quote, regular people, end quote, when under this government's watch, the dream of affording a regular life is now beyond one's reach. In the face of this, we see a province grappling with the most unaffordable housing costs in North America and the highest rents in Canada. In 7 years under this government, the average cost of a townhome in Vancouver has surged by $400,000. Renters, too, find themselves hurting, paying nearly $6,000 more annually under this NDP government. Our cities, including Vancouver, Victoria, and my hometown of Kelowna, now boast some of the least affordable rental markets, with vacancy rates plummeting to 1%. This isn't just a crisis, it's an NDP catastrophe. We've heard about all of the suite of laws and taxes lauded here this morning, but newsflash, none of that has worked. This motion, rather than being a step forward, is a stark reminder of the NDP's failure to address the core issues plaguing our housing market. Take, for example, the proposal of a house-flipping tax by the NDP. While seemingly a step in the right direction, lacks the substance and structural support to make a real impact. Historical data and economic analysis suggest that such measures, without comprehensive strategy, barely scratch the surface of the housing affordability crisis. Moreover, this approach neglects to consider the broader economic implications, potentially stifling investment and development crucial for housing supply expansion. This is true throughout BC, but especially in Vancouver, where over 60% of all new housing units were bought in pre-sale. What happens if those pre-sales stop? Banks stop financing. New housing stops. Our BC United opposition brings forth not just criticism, but the first plank of our housing plan, United to Fix Housing, aimed at real solutions, not empty promises that yield no outcomes. We're introducing bold initiatives such as the rent-to-own program, the elimination of the property transfer tax for first-time homebuyers up to $1 million, and the use of public land for affordable housing. Ideas that when even the NDP tries to copy, they can't seem to get it right. The BC United Caucus is the only party here with the experience, understanding, and willingness to pursue new ideas that will undo the NDP damage and bring back the dream of home ownership. While we acknowledge the intent behind a flipping tax, experience has taught us that good intentions under this government often lead to poorly executed policies. The real issue at hand is not merely flipping, it's the lack of a holistic approach to housing supply. Policies need to address supply constraints, bureaucratic red tape, and incentivize both the public and private sectors to contribute meaningfully to solve the housing crisis. You know what this government has not done? Guarantee timeframes on provincial housing approvals of the Ministry of Transportation, Environment, Agriculture, Forest, Water, Land, and Resource Stewardship. Why not? Well, because they're too busy blaming everyone else for their utter housing failures. This tax is yet another measure that won't have an effect on housing prices or availability. But don't believe us. Believe the NDP's own consultant, Dr. Tom Davidoff, associate professor at UBC's Sauder School of Business, who said that when it comes to affordability, he doesn't believe the tax will bring housing prices down. And I quote, "I think the flipping tax is not important at all for long-run affordability, but it may be important to provide political cover." End quote. Wow. Political cover, hey? It's time for a government that acts in the true interests of its citizens, rather than one that looks for political cover, plays to false beliefs and misinformation, and risks more catastrophic consequences, ultimately failing to address the root causes of the struggles of the people, merely to stay elected. Do better, NDP. Thank you, Honourable Speaker.
Member for Richmond, Queensborough.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Rent to own. Sometimes I feel like I'm in a bad 80s TV commercial. But anyways, Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of the motion, be it resolved that this House agrees to put the interests of regular people who are looking to afford a home ahead of real estate speculators and investors. Firstly, let me reiterate what an honor it is to be back in the People's Chamber and how much gratitude I'm filled with for having the opportunity and privilege to speak here. I remind myself of this, of the fact that we are all sent here with the trust of the people of our communities to do their work and to represent them and their priorities. I often say governing is all about priorities, and I'm proud to stand here with a government that prioritizes people over profits and antiquated economic models. A government that works to take care of people and their needs, be it in housing, healthcare, or their personal safety. When I speak with people or I go to the grocery store, Mr. Speaker, and I look at my receipt, I can't help but think how hard life is for most people. Not just here in Canada, but around the world. People have suffered an incredible hardship for the last few years. The pandemic and the response needed to keep people safe had significant impact, followed by catastrophic events year after year fueled by climate change, coupled with a unique position that we in BC are in, where something like almost 500,000 people moved to BC over the last 2 years. Add on to that the increasing greed of large corporations that have seen record profits, yet keep raising the prices of necessities like food, bread. It's tough out there. And when it's tough, that's exactly when the people that put us here need us to step up and make sure that no one is left behind. That's why, since being elected, this government has been doing exactly that and will continue to do that. People want a decent home they can afford in a community they love. That's why our government has been leading the country in finding solutions to the widespread housing crisis. It's not just here in British Columbia, it's in a lot of places. And taking action to deliver more homes that are within reach for people, and not just rehashing washed out ideas that at their core just benefit a select few people. What is needed here is a whole suite of ideas that attack the problem from multiple angles, and that's what we have been doing. We've spoken many times about the thousands upon thousands of family homes that came onto the market with the empty homes and speculation taxes. Thousands more are predicted to join the market with our legislation that reins in out-of-control short-term rental market. Homes should be for people to live in, not for speculators and investors to hoard. We will continue to expand the speculation and vacancy tax. This has proven to work effectively. We passed a whole suite of legislation that fixes restrictive and outdated zoning rules. I often hear of business people who want to develop and build a home and the struggles that they have with the time it takes to build a home. Every day that that home is delayed adds to the expense of that home and increases its unaffordability. We're tackling that. Our plan includes turning more land and area near transit hubs into homes for people. Gone are the days of large mansions and single-family homes. We need density so people can have a place to call home. We're making sure secondary suites can be built in every community in British Columbia, and that if an owner chooses to do so, they can build multiple units on their property, making it more affordable for more people. And as you heard last week, we have new measures that complement the arsenal of tools that we have already put out. This includes the BC home flipping tax. Mr. Speaker, as a lawyer at a small law firm that operated in the fastest growing community at that time, Surrey, I often heard from colleagues about how home prices were being inflated through assignments, subcontracts, and drive-through sales by investors and speculators. That's exactly what this is tackling. As part of the Homes for People plan and to discourage speculators from driving up prices, there'll be a new BC home flipping tax effective January 1st, 2025. This will be a tax on the profit made from selling a residential property within 2 years of buying it. Of course, there are some specific exemptions that allow for the inevitability of life. We understand people have needs, and we understand that situations change. To help families purchase their homes, there will also be new exemptions on the property transfer tax. For many, buying a home is the largest purchase that they will ever make, and property prices are making it harder. Every little bit counts, and Budget 2024 aims to give people the financial boost they need to bring buying a home within reach. To help lower the cost and encourage construction of more rental units, eligible purpose-built rental buildings or four or more units will also receive a property transfer tax exemption. Raising these property transfer tax exemption thresholds and incentivizing building of new rentals and homes will save more people more money, an estimated $100 million per year. The private sector alone has not been able to deliver the homes middle-income British Columbians need. That's why government needs to step in. Since 2017, the province has created more than 78,000 homes that have been delivered or are underway as a result of continued investments and other housing initiatives. That's what you need is a suite of initiatives, and that's what we're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Surrey White Rock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm actually very thankful for the opportunity to speak on this motion. It's an important one. And we are at a crossroads when it comes to housing. We've been at a crossroads for a number of years now. And the fact is that I did hear a member talk about lands and selling of lands and how they sold lands in the 90s for housing. And it reminds me that actually in 2014, it was the BC Liberal, now United government at the time that sold 800 hectares to Haisla. And some may know the former chief of Haisla, who may be sitting to my immediate left. What did they build on those 808 hectares? Homes. Homes. That's what they built. And we talk about today, the fact is that, and we hear, I think in the motion, it mentions speculator. And we hear in 2017 that this government was going to build 114,000 units. And so, you know what, if you do the math, if the Premier would have donated the money that he got when he flipped his condo, which was $150,000, if he would have donated $1 to each of those homes that they promised to do, he'd have $36,000 left over. And so I think that, they got to be careful with the language they use, because you might want to look in the mirror. Might want to look inside a cabinet room. Might want to look at the Premier's office and have an understanding of what may work for them may not work for others. And when they're in that cabinet room, they might want to look at the table and they might want to look at the Minister of Transportation. And they might want to say, Minister, are you part of the problem or are you part of the solution? Because when we see the backlogs of permits from the Ministry of Transportation and how that's affecting housing right now, that minister's got a lot of work to do. A lot of work to do. Because I can tell you, whether you're in a municipality or you're a developer or you're looking at development in cul-de-sacs or other areas, the Ministry of Transportation has a role to play. And right now, I don't know if the Minister of Transportation is aware of that role, because they've got an enormous backlog. So they can point at the municipalities, which they do, and in some cases they definitely should. But they better be looking around that cabinet table to say, are you doing your job? So when we look at the issue, and I heard the member previously said that single-family homes are gone. We've had another minister say that the last generation of home ownership is gone. So where are we here? We've got two government MLAs that are saying the ability for home ownership is past us, and now we have another MLA saying no more to single-family homes. We just heard it less than 5 minutes ago in this House, verbatim. You know, the biggest problem that any government has is when you have a tendency to overpromise and underdeliver. My riding, I see it every day. It's a lot of seniors on very fixed incomes. This government campaigned on a renter's rebate. It's now, after 7 years, finally got around to do a renter's rebate that you got to apply for, you get denied for. We have an absolute crisis across this province when it comes to housing. And I think it's at a time where they can mock solutions that others put forward, but they don't have enough political capital in the bank to be doing that right now. Because I can tell you there is not one person in this province that would give this government a pass on the current situation we have in housing. I know for a fact that's the existence of my riding. When I am spending my weekends at different areas because they can't even get through to the Ministry of Housing because they don't have heat and hot water, like, let's start with that. Let's get those problems fixed. But, Mr. Speaker, I think that it's imperative that this government, this premier, this cabinet, take a long look in the mirror and figure out if they're part of the problem or the solution.
Member for Nanaimo North Cowichan.
Hey. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my pleasure to rise in support of this motion and to recognize that this province has experienced a shortage of housing that built up over a couple of decades and in fact was made much worse by the previous government. British Columbians over the last 5 years have seen almost 500,000 people come to this province. There's record numbers, and they're coming here because of low inflation and high wages, a thriving economy, and a government that backstops the people of its province. So they come here with those expectations, but find housing challenges. And this government, in contrast to the former BC Liberal United government, does take steps in a multifaceted way to answer that multifaceted question of how to solve the housing crisis in this province. It is a multifaceted question that we're asked. Is it student housing? Is it seniors housing? Is it low-income housing? Is it middle-income housing? It is all of those things, and this government is bringing forward solutions for all of those questions, in contrast to the former BC Liberal government, which simply answered through its housing minister to those in the lower mainland who are looking for housing, maybe you should move to Fort St. John. And they left it up completely to developers to answer the question and the crisis, and that made it worse. So their do-nothing approach has been answered by this government with a do something on every level approach. Student housing is a good measure of the difference. Over 8,000 housing units for students built by this government in comparison to 138 built by the BC Liberal/United government that lasted 16 years. Their answer to the inflation of rents was to add 2% to the inflation rate. In the past year, that would have resulted in approximately 8%, the last 2 years, 8% rent increases. This government capped those rental increases well below inflation at 2%. Those economic wizards who ran this province for 16 years would have made that inflation permanent. As we see interest rates come down, those rates, rental rates would have continued to climb from that inflated level that they would have had us allow. This government has solutions for people, and we see the struggles. We see them every day. People come into our offices, people in our families, searching for housing solutions, and that's a difficult thing to solve. But this government has acted on so many levels. The Rental Tenancy Act that balances the interests between landlords and tenants, moves disputes through the system quicker, rental credits of up to $400, a rental bank that had $13 million added to it in the budget the other day that helps people who have immediate and urgent loss of income to not lose their homes. We have allowed extra density and extra suites throughout the province. So that will be a solution that won't even show up in housing numbers. But this government took that act in defense and in support of British Columbians. Rental zoning around transit and rental zoning for local governments frees up local governments to act and create rental housing. We have record amounts of rental housing under construction. BC Builds is going to deliver in partnership with local governments, First Nations, even school districts, housing for middle-income folks. In the Nanaimo North Couch and the constituency I represent, Mr. Speaker, over 1,800 units have been delivered already. So, Mr. Speaker, we have a comprehensive approach to a multifaceted problem that is delivering on all levels. And the members opposite, their history is to do nothing. Their history is to promise and not deliver. They promised 5,000 housing units, 2001, didn't deliver. Promised them in 2005, took federal money and put that into assisted living and produced no housing for low and middle income British Columbians. So this is the plan that the BC NDP has offered to, and is delivering is Canada's leading housing strategy, and other provinces are following suit. The federal government is partnering with this province because our plans work. They work for British Columbians. We stand behind the people of British Columbia. They understand that. That's why we're sitting here and they're sitting there.
Member for Peace River South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a privilege to stand up and speak to this, I guess if we want to call it, a motion. I will be frank, when I first saw this motion being presented, I thought it was a bit of an April Fool's joke when this came out. Maybe it's just taking something from a year or two ago and thinking it meant something and bringing it back. But, you know, when I look at this, the motion should have read more like, be it resolved, the regular people cannot afford to live in British Columbia under an NDP government anymore. That would at least been more factual. That would have been more factual to what's taking place right now in British Columbia. In fact, you know, Honourable Speaker, one of the most frustrating things, I think, for not just the opposition when we're trying to hold government accountable, but regular British Columbians, is it doesn't matter what we talk about now in this province under 7 years of an NDP government, every single thing, the term crisis is used. Whether it's healthcare, whether it's crime and addictions, whether it's affordability and housing, every single time one of these issues is talked about, the word crisis is used. Now, when we want to talk about housing specifically, I find it really interesting even the speaker before me. Really what we're seeing, Honourable Speaker, is it doesn't matter what the facts are, doesn't matter what the truth is. Obviously, some researcher in the basement writes the members' speeches, and so they just read them off without doing research themselves. But in fact, under the BC United, BC Liberals, we actually built 24,000 affordable housing units during our time, not what this member was talking about. In fact, we also ended up building 9,300 units of student housing. And if you ever actually want to leave, Victoria, I know there's a place actually out there called rural BC. Most of the NDP have never actually bothered visiting it. But if they actually came to places like mine, I'll give them a personal tour of many of the housing units, student housing units that were built while we were in government, something I was proud of. And Okanagan, they're everywhere. But of course, again, they don't want to acknowledge it because it doesn't fit their narrative. You know what does fit their narrative, Honourable Speaker? The facts that people are struggling in British Columbia. In fact, we just heard a throne speech, 2 weeks later than normal, I will add, but we just heard a throne speech that we haven't had a chance to debate, really. Go figure again, they don't want to be held accountable. But that throne speech basically highlighted all of the problems people are facing in British Columbia around housing, healthcare, affordability. No solutions. Ironically, we're in an election year. This government has no plan, I guess, but they just talked about the struggles everybody's facing. Then we come out with a budget that basically highlights the same thing. Look, we are in a housing crisis. You want to make housing more affordable, start building more housing. This government has been unable to achieve almost every promise that they did in a photo op in trying to fix the housing crisis. In fact, they backpedal and walk away from most of the promises that they've made over the last 7 years, Honourable Speaker. We need to be fixing the housing crisis. And again, I use the word crisis. I would have a lot more understanding of this government if they stood up and just claimed the fact, yes, we're in a crisis and we've been in government for 7 years and we've done nothing about it. In fact, mostly what I hear out there is this government acts just like opposition, because rather than actually making decisions and trying to fix the problems that are under their watch, they just try to do a blame game on everybody else. Newsflash, you're the decision makers. You get to do something about it, and you've done nothing. And people in British Columbia are suffering because of it. So, Mr. Speaker, you know, we need to be fixing this crisis, the crisis that this government, again, has had a watch over for 7 years. So other than a bunch of empty promises that haven't delivered, maybe it's time they look at some of the things that we've talked about within our plan, like the rent-to-own program, eliminating the property transfer tax for up for $1 million, saving people money. Like, these are actual, realistic, tangible targets that can actually help people. Rather than putting up red tape, rather than actually alienating and actually insulting, I would say, the people who actually build houses, because we know it's not the government. The Premier's even admitted that he needs the private sector to do this because of government's failure. But then what do? Motions and narratives in the public that they're against the people who actually build the homes. The NDP can't do it. Maybe they need to step up and actually acknowledge that other people need to be doing it on recognizing their failures. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Coquitlam Burke Mountain.
Thank you, Speaker. I'm pleased to rise in support of the member for Maple Ridge Mission's motion that this House agree to put the interests of regular people looking to afford a home ahead of real estate speculators and investors. In fact, I believe most British Columbians support this motion. They believe, like I do, homes should be built to house people and not investment vehicles to make a quick buck. When speculators manipulate the housing market, they drive up prices for everyone. Our government recognizes British Columbians need homes they can afford in their own communities. That's why our government introduced the BC Home Flipping Tax to help the housing market work better for people. The flipping tax will tax the profit made from selling a residential property within 2 years of buying it, with exemptions for life circumstances such as divorce, death, illness, and work relocation. Between 2020 and 2022, 7% of residential home sales in BC were resold for profit. Revenue from the flipping tax will directly fund affordable housing programs in BC. This is why I'm confident residents in Coquitlam Burke Mountain support this tax and the member's motion. People in Coquitlam Burke Mountain are already experiencing benefits from our government's work to protect homes and invest in affordable housing. Here are some examples. Earlier this month, our government made an exciting housing announcement in Coquitlam Burke Mountain. The Tri-Branch Co-op, consisting of 169 homes, and the Garden Court Co-op, made up of 121 homes, were both protected when they became the first acquisition of BC's $500 million rental protection fund. At that happy announcement, the Premier said far too many renters live in fear that their homes will be sold out from under them. This landmark acquisition protects 290 affordable homes in the heart of Coquitlam, ensuring people can continue living in the community they helped to build. Speaker, I worked for 2 years with the co-op members, the Community Land Trust, the operating engineers, the City of Coquitlam, BC Housing, and of course, our housing minister. And on February 8th, the Premier announced $71 million of BC's $500 million rental protection fund would be used to secure 290 affordable home rental units in Coquitlam Burke Mountain. Hooray. Speaker, during the 2020 provincial election, I learned of another co-op housing project located in Coquitlam Burke Mountain whose future was uncertain. The Hoy Creek Housing Co-op was a 40-year-old development that needed upgrading and was in financial trouble. Rather than allow the site to the private market, the province's community housing fund provided $14 million to create 132 new non-market units. And Speaker, this Friday, I'll be attending an open house at Robert Nicklin Place in Coquitlam. This housing project, operated by Affordable Housing Societies, provides rental units that are affordable for a broad range of income levels. The old rental buildings on the site needed to be replaced, but the residents were concerned if the land was sold to private speculators, their homes would be replaced with market-priced units that none of them could afford. However, BC Housing joined other government funders, contributing $8.1 million to help ensure 164 units of non-market housing, affordable housing, were built on that site. Speaker, the BC home flipping tax is an additional action being taken by our government to help ensure residents in Coquitlam Burke Mountain, and indeed throughout British Columbia, can obtain secure, affordable rental housing now and into the future. I'm pleased to support the member's motion, which is in keeping with the many positive new and exciting housing initiatives put in place by our government in 2017, or since 2017. Thank you, Speaker.
Member to move the adjournment of debate.
Speaker, I now move adjournment
Or
of the debate.
Member, you heard the question to adjourn the debate. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Government House Leader.
Speaker, now I move the House to be adjourned.
You heard the question. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. This House stands adjourned until 1:30 p.m. this afternoon.